the Grand Master of Demonic Cultivation. Extra Chapter, Incense Burner, Part 2. The second morning, Wei Wuxian somehow woke up earlier than Lan Wangji did. His legs were shaking throughout the entire day. The taper incense burner was seized and scrutinized by them for a long while. Wei Wuxian took it apart and put it back together, but he still couldn't understand the mystery behind it. Translator note: this refers to the mythical animal in the shape of which the incense burner was built. These creatures are often connected to dreams. Sitting beside the desk, Wei Wuxian pondered, if it's not a problem with the incense, then it has to be a problem with the incense burner. What a thing! It feels so real even empathy might not compare to it. Was it ever recorded in the library pavilion? Lan Wangji shook his head. If he shook his head, that meant it was certain nobody had ever recorded it. Wei Wuxian: oh, well. Its potency has already passed. We should store it properly for now so that other people don't come into contact with it by accident. If some master of spiritual tools ever visit us, we could take it out again and ask them. They both thought that the incense burner's potency has passed already, yet what happened was beyond what they expected. At night, after a round between the sheets, Wei Wuxian and Lan Wangji fell asleep side by side, lying within the jiangshi. Soon after, he opened his eyes again only to discover that he was again lying below the magnolia tree outside the library pavilion. The sunlight spilled onto his face through the flowering branches. Wei Wuxian squinted, covering it with his hand. He slowly got up. This time, however, Lan Wangji wasn't beside him. Wei Wuxian cupped his right hand around his lips, shouting, "Lan Zan!" Nobody answered. Wei Wuxian wondered, looks like the incense burner's potency hasn't passed yet. But where's Lan Zan? Don't tell me I'm the only one affected by the incense burner's leftover powers? Before the magnolia trees was a small path of white pebbles. A group of the Gusu Lan sect's disciples, wearing white clothes and forehead ribbons, passed carrying a few books each, as though they were about to attend their morning lectures. None of them spared Wei Wuxian a single glance, still unable to see him. Wei Wuxian went up the library pavilion and stole a look. Lan Wangji wasn't inside, no matter the big one or the small one. And so he got down again, beginning his aimless stroll throughout the cloud recesses. Not long afterwards, he managed to make out the whispering voices of two boys. He walked closer, finding that one of their voices sounded quite familiar. Nobody had ever kept any within the bounds of the cloud recesses. To do such a thing is unheard of. After a moment of silence, the other boy answered, somewhat dejected, I know. But I have already made my promise. I cannot go against my word. Wei Wuxian picked this up. He sneakily glanced over. As expected, conversing amidst a clearing of green grass was Lan Zichen and Lan Wangji. It was a spring day vibrant with soft winds. The young brothers seemed to be two immaculate pieces of jade, reflected against each other. Both were dressed in snowy robes, their wide sleeves and forehead ribbons flapping in the wind, almost as if they were a painting. The Lan Wangji at this point in time was also just about 16. He frowned slightly, as though he was worried about something. What he held in his arm was a white rabbit, sniffing its pink nose, and beside his foot was another rabbit, its long ears perked up as it stood clinging to his boot, trying to climb up. Lan Zichen, how could the casual remarks between two boys be considered a serious promise? Is it really because of this? Lan Wangji looked at the ground and said nothing. Lan Zichen smiled, fine. Then if by any chance Uncle asks of this, you must explain things to him properly. These days, you have been spending just a little too much time on them. Lan Wangji nodded solemnly, thank you, brother. With a pause, he added, they will not affect my studies. Lan Zichen, I know, Wangji. However, you must not tell uncle who gave these to you. Or else, out of rage, he would make you send them away no matter what. Hearing this, it seemed as though Lan Wangji hugged the rabbit in his arms even tighter. Lan Zichen smiled. He reached out and poked the rabbit's pink nose with his fingertip, before leisurely walking away. After he left, Lan Wangji stood there for a while, thinking. The rabbit at times flicked its ears, resting within his arms in a comfortable manner. The one by his foot clung even more anxiously. Lan Wangji glanced at it before bending down and picking it up as well. He placed both rabbits inside his arms, stroking gently. The tenderness of his hands contrasted his expression. Wei Wuxian felt his heart itch from just the sight of the scene. He walked out from behind the tree, wanting to get even closer to the young Lan Wangji. Yet, the rabbits fell from Lan Wangji's hands, and the atmosphere changed at once. He spun around. After he saw whom it was, his piercing gaze immediately faltered. You? He was shocked, yet Wei Wuxian was even more shocked. You can see me? This was definitely the strangest. Logically, those inside the dream shouldn't be able to see him. But right now, Lan Wangji looked straight at him. Of course I can. You are Wei Ying? The young man in front of him looked over 20, definitely older than 15. And yet, he indeed had the same face as Wei Wuxian. Lan Wangji couldn't figure out the identity of the intruder, maintaining sharp vigilance. If he were wearing his sword right now, he would have probably unsheathed Baiken already. Wei Wuxian reacted with extreme swiftness. He fixed his expression at once. It's me. With such an answer, Lan Wangji's face seemed even more alarmed as he walked a few steps backward. Wei Wuxian put on a wounded expression and tone. Lan Zan, I took such great pains to come back and find you, how could you treat me like this? Lan Wangji, are you truly Wei Ying? Wei Wuxian, of course. Lan Wangji, then why is your appearance different? Wei Wuxian, now that'd be a long story. This is what happened. I'm Wei Wuxian indeed, but I'm Wei Wuxian from 7 years in the future. 7 years later, I discovered a powerful tool that let me travel back in time into the past. I was just in the middle of examining it when I touched it accidentally, and here I am. The explanation was so absurd it couldn't even fool a child. Lan Wangji's voice was cold. How can you prove it? Wei Wuxian, how do you want me to? I know absolutely everything about you. The rabbit you were hugging as well as the one by your feet, those were from me, weren't they? You seemed so reluctant when you accepted them, yet now you refuse to let them go even when your brother tells you not to. You've fallen in love. Hearing this, Lan Wangji's expression changed slightly. He seemed as if he wanted to say something, yet stopped in the middle. Wei Wuxian walked a few steps closer, opening his arms with a wide grin. What's wrong? You embarrassed? Seeing just how peculiar his actions were, Lan Wangji looked as though he faced a formidable enemy, his face full of caution as he walked even more steps back. Wei Wuxian hadn't seen Lan Wangji face him with such an attitude in a long time. He laughed in secret as he feigned anger. What do you mean by this? What are you avoiding me for? Good for you, Lan Zan. For 10 years you and I have been husband and wife, and now you've forgotten about me so easily? With this, Lan Wangji's handsome, icy features snapped instantaneously. He began, for 10 years? You and I have been husband and wife? It was only 11 words, yet he only managed to spit them out after a handful of pauses. Wei Wuxian seemed as though he finally realized something. Oh, I forgot. You don't know about this yet. Doing the maths, it seems like we've only just met each other? Did I just leave the cloud recesses? No worries. Let me tell you a secret, just a few years, and we'll become partners in cultivation. Lan Wangji, partners in cultivation? Wei Wuxian gloated, that's right. The kind that practices dual cultivation every day. It was a proper, orthodox marriage, we've even prostrated. Lan Wangji was so enraged that his chest heaved slightly. A moment later, a few words seeped from between his teeth, utterly nonsense. Wei Wuxian, you'll know if it's nonsense or not if you keep listening for just a bit longer. When you sleep, you like to hug me tightly, and you have to be hugging me or else you won't be able to sleep. Every time you kiss me it's always so long, and when it ends you like to bite me gently before you leave. Oh, right, You like to bite me too when we're doing that other thing, like on my body. Ever since the words hug me tightly, Lan Wangji's expression had become twisted. The longer he listened, the greater his reaction was. It was as if he was about to cover his ears to block at the obscenity, lunging forward ready to strike. Nonsense. Wei Wuxian dodged to the side. Nonsense again? At least change things up a bit. And how do you even know I'm talking nonsense? Is this not what you're like? Lan Wangji spoke a word at a time. I have never kissed. So how could I know what I like? When I... Wei Wuxian thought for a bit. You're not wrong. You haven't kissed anyone yet at this age, so of course you don't know what you're like when you kiss someone. Wanna try right now? Lan Wangji was in such a rage he had even forgotten to summon the disciples and seize the suspicious intruder. He attacked strike after strike, aiming straight for his wrist. He was still young at this point, however. Wei Wuxian was a lot more skilled, easily avoiding the attacks. Spotting an opening, he pinched somewhere on Lan Wangji's arm, and Lan Wangji's movements paused. With this opportunity, Wei Wuxian landed a light beck on his cheek. After the kiss, Wei Wuxian let go of Lan Wangji's arm and released the restraint. But Lan Wangji was already a frozen statue, and for a long time he remained so, sent into a daze. Ha 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 ha. Wei Wuxian laughed himself awake from the dream. He laughed so hard he almost rolled off the bed. Fortunately, Lan Wangji's arms were always wrapped around his waist. Along with the laughter, his entire body trembled the moment he woke up, making Lan Wangji wake up from his sleep as well. The two sat up together. Lan Wangji looked down, massaging his temple with one hand. Just now, Wei Wuxian, just now, did you have a dream that you met a 20-something-year-old me when you were 15? Lan Wangji stared at him, the incense burner. Wei Wuxian nodded. I thought I only entered the dream again because of the incense burner's after effects, yet who knew you were the one who was influenced even more heavily? Tonight's situation was different from last time's. Just now, the young Lanzan in the dream was a Lan Wangji himself. Those who were dreaming often didn't know that they were dreaming. And thus, Lan Wangji really thought he was only 15 in his dream. It was a proper dream at first, morning lectures, strolls, taking care of rabbits. Yet, he ran right into Wei Wuxian, who snuck into his dream and decided to make mischief there. After he was caught, what came was a good round of teasing. Wei Wuxian, I can't anymore, Lanzan. How you looked hugging your rabbit and not letting go, scared out of your wits that your brother and your uncle might not let you have them. I love you so much. Ha 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 ha. Lan Wangji didn't know how to respond. It is late at night. Your laughter might disturb others. Wei Wuxian, you think we're quiet every day at night? Why did you wake up so early? Wake up a bit later, and I'd drag you to the far mountains of your sect and do bad things with you, letting the young Lanner judge have a first taste of the good stuff in life. Ha 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 ha. Lan Wangji watched him roll around at the side. He never ended up finding the words. After sitting for a while, he suddenly reached out and pressed Wei Wuxian down onto the bed. The two thought that after the second night passed, the incense burner's powers should have dissipated already. Yet, the third night, Wei Wuxian woke up in Lan Wangji's dream again. Dressed in black, he sauntered through the white pebble paths of the cloud recesses, Changqing's red tassel bobbing up and down with each stride of his. Soon, the sound of reciting textbook material floated by. It was from the direction of the Lanchai. Wei Wuxian strutted towards the room. As expected, a couple of the Lansec's disciples were doing their evening studies inside. Lan Qiren wasn't there. Lan Wangji was still the one who supervised. The Lan Wangji of tonight's dream still appeared to be young, but he was more like the one Wei Wuxian saw in the cave of the Xuanwu, about 17 or 18. His features held an elegance that already carried the air of a prominent cultivator, yet still bore the youthful green of a young man. He sat attentively before the room. When someone had a question and came forth to ask, he would take a swift glance before immediately coming up with an answer, his serious expression creating stark contrast against his adolescence. Wei Wuxian leaned against a pillar outside the Lanshai. Having watched for a while, he soundlessly swept up to the roof and placed Chengqing near his lips. Within the Lanshai, Lan Wangji paused slightly. One of the boys asked, "Young master, what is it?" Lan Wangji, who was playing the flute at such a time. The boys looked at one another. Quickly, one of them replied, "I hear no flute." With this, Lan Wangji frowned somewhat. He stood up and went out the door, holding his sword, just in time for Wei Wuxian to put his flute away and land nimbly on another roof with a leap. Lan Wangji noticed the movement, ordering in a loud voice, "Who is it?" Wei Wuxian let out two crisp whistles slide out from below his tongue. The sound was already a couple dozen yards away. He laughed, "It's your husband." Hearing the voice, Lan Wangji's expression changed. He couldn't be sure. Wei Ying? Wei Wuxian didn't answer him. Lan Wangji unsheathed Baiken from his back and chased after him. With a few hops and leaps, Wei Wuxian had already landed atop the tall walls of the cloud recesses. He stood up, stepping on a rooftop tile. Lan Wangji landed as well, standing a few feet away from him. Holding Baiken, his forehead riven, his sleeves, and the lower hems of his robes flapped in the night wind, almost heavenly. Wei Wuxian put his hands behind his back, grinning, "What a handsome man with what handsome moves." With such a scene, it'd be absolutely perfect if there were to be a handsome jar of Emperor's smile. Lan Wangji stared straight at him. A moment later, he spoke, "Wei Ying, what do you need, visiting the cloud recesses at night uninvited?" Wei Wuxian, "Guess?" Lan Wangji, "Ridiculous." Baiken's blade sliced past, yet Wei Wuxian dodged it easily. The young adult Lan Wangji was already adept at the sword, yet in front of the current Wei Wuxian, he couldn't really pose much of a threat. Just a few exchanges, and he caught an opening, slapping a talisman onto Lan Wangji's chest. Lan Wangji's body froze, unable to move, while Wei Wuxian grabbed him and sprinted towards the back mountains of the cloud recesses. Wei Wuxian found a thick bush of herb plants. Lan Wangji was placed here, leaning against a white rock. "What do you want?" Wei Wuxian pinched his cheek, his face serious. "Rape." Lan Wangji couldn't tell if he was joking or not, face growing pale. "Wei Ying, you must not act so recklessly." Wei Wuxian laughed, "You know me. I love acting recklessly." As he spoke, he reached under Lan Wangji's thick layers and took a squeeze at a critical region of his. The squeeze was quite skillfully executed, between light and heavy. Instantly, Lan Wangji's expression grew funny. The corners of his mouth twitched as he sealed his lips together, eventually managing to take control over his face and feign calmness. However, Wei Wuxian went even further, untying his sashes and stripping his lower garments in just a few moves. He weighed in his hand the heavy thing that didn't at all match Lan Wangji's delicate features, praising from the bottom of his heart, "You've truly been talented since a young age, Han Guangjun." After he spoke, he even gave the shaft a light flick. With such a private part of his body being played with like this, Lan Wangji already looked as if he was about to die from rage. He didn't have the spare energy to think about whom Han Guangjun was either, his voice harsh. "Wei Ying." Wei Wuxian snickered, "Shout all you want. Nobody would come to save you even if you shout your throat hoarse." Lan Wangji was about to speak again as he watched Wei Wuxian finish laughing and, brushing a strand of hair behind his ear, sink down to swallow the length down below. Shock exploded in Lan Wangji's eyes. He couldn't even believe what was happening, his entire body stiff. The 17-year-old Lan Wangji was still surrounded by youthful immaturity, yet the size of that erection was definitely not to be reckoned fault with. Wei Wuxian slowly took the length into his mouth. Even before he could swallow everything, he felt its slippery tip knock against the wall of his throat. The body of the erection was thick and searing. The inside of his mouth could even feel the strong pulse of its veins. His cheeks also puffed from stuffing the foreign object inside. Despite the difficulty, He still patiently sent the remaining bit deeper into his throat. Wei Wuxian was indeed quite experienced with dealing with that member of Lan Wangji's. He gave it all that he had, sucking and licking with much noise, almost as though he was tasting some sort of delicacy with devotion. Even with Lan Wangji's ever so fair complexion that refused to let out a single tint of red, he was still blushing at his neck and ears, breaths shallow. Wei Wuxian spent so long time sucking and swallowing that even his cheeks began to hurt, yet still there was no release. He was quite puzzled as to what was going on. It was impossible he wasn't even skilled enough to handle the 17-year-old Lan Wangji. He glanced up, however, only to find that Lan Wangji's face was full of endurance. The rod was clearly already as hard as iron, yet he persisted stubbornly, refusing to release almost as if he was trying to protect some last line of defense. He found it to be quite amusing, his desire to make mischief rising up again. The moist tip of the tongue licked again and again the slit atop the thick glands. With a few deep throats, Lan Wangji finally couldn't hold it any longer and let it out. The ejaculate was rather thick, its musky smell pouring into his throat. Wei Wuxian straightened up, coughing lightly as he wiped the corner of his mouth with the back of his hand. Like before, he swallowed everything. On the other hand, after the release, Lan Wangji stared fixedly at Wei Wuxian with red eyes, speechless, whether as his body's response to the orgasm or simply out of rage and embarrassment. Wei Wuxian felt his heart melt, seeing such a humiliated face. He lay a gentle peck on his cheek. "All right. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have bullied you." As he spoke, he wiped his fingers on the length that had just ejaculated and drew his hands back, untying his sash to take off his lower garments. Wei Wuxian had slender legs, his thighs white as jade, lined by smooth muscles. The pair of buttocks was round and full, creating quite an enjoyable scene. On the other hand, leaning against the rock, Lan Wangji was most certainly able to see all that and more that was going on beneath Wei Wuxian's body. Kneeling among the grass, Wei Wuxian turned around and lay prone onto the ground, facing Lan Wangji with his back. He moved the fingers smeared with white towards his lower body. The entrance hid amidst the deep crevice. Wei Wuxian only revealed the spot of pink after he parted the cheeks slightly. The slit was soft and rather yielding. It was closed properly at first, yet as Wei Wuxian gently massaged Lan Wangji's semen around the entrance with his two long fingers, it began to open, almost shyly swallowing the fingertip. Wei Wuxian sent his finger slowly and firmly all the way inside before starting to move it in and out. A while later, he began to speed up somewhat, and he was growing erect at the front as well. When watery squelches began to come from behind, Wei Wuxian inserted a third finger. He let out a soft breath, as though it was becoming too much for him. He was well aware of his capabilities, and his fingers slowed down again. Amid the night, these details shouldn't come across as obvious, but Lan Wangji's senses were sharp, especially his sight. He could do nothing but watch as the titillating scene carried on in front of his eyes, somehow unable to even look away. In bed, Wei Wuxian liked to reach the peak alongside Lan Wangji. In case he released too early, thus, he avoided the key region within his body during the fingering process. However, Lan Wangji had always taken quite good care of his sensitive spot. Right now, unable to be satisfied, his inner wall tightened more than usual, contracting time after time as though it was discontent. When the fingers at time didn't touch the spot, his hips would sink uncontrollably, sending the spot towards his fingers. With a few of these near brushes, Wei Wuxian felt his thighs tremble weakly, almost unable to keep kneeling any longer. He immediately withdrew his fingers, taking a moment to calm down. Turning back, he caught Lan Wangji off guard with the sudden eye contact. Lan Wangji shut his eyes closed at once. Wei Wuxian smirked. "Hey, Lan-san, what are you doing? Reciting the Lansex sect rules in your heart?" With the correct guess, Lan Wangji's eyelashes flickered. He seemed like he wanted to open his eyes, yet in the end he still held it back. Wei Wuxian continued lazily, "Look at me, won't you? What are you scared of? It's not like I'd do anything bad to you." His voice was pleasant to start with. When he said those words, his tone was so languid and frivolous that it almost seemed like a little hook. Yet, it was as if Lan Wangji was determined to not look, not listen, not speak, and definitely not pay him any regard, refusing to be affected. Wei Wuxian, are you really gonna be so harmless as to not even give me a look? With a few more teasing words, as he saw that Lan Wangji wouldn't open his eyes no matter what, Wei Wuxian raised a brow. Well, if this is the case, I'll be borrowing your Baiken for a bit. You won't mind that, will you? As he spoke, he indeed picked up the fallen Baiken. Lan Wangji's eyes sprang open, his voice harsh. What are you going to do? Wei Wuxian, what do you think I'm going to do? Lan Wangji, I do not know. Wei Wuxian, if you don't know what I'm going to do, why are you being so anxious? Lan Wangji, I. Wei Wuxian stared at him with a grin. He waved Baiken in his hand before he looked down, planting a soft kiss on Baiken's hilt. Right after, he stuck at the scarlet tip of his tongue and began to lick the hilt. Baiken's blade was rather transparent, as if made of ice and snow, yet its hilt was forged from pure, refined silver. It was quite heavy in terms of weight, its carvings ancient and elegant. The scene before him was truly erotic. Lan Wangji seemed as though he was extremely upset. Let go of Baiken. Wei Wuxian, why? Lan Wangji, it is my sword. You cannot use it to. Wei Wuxian mused, I know it's your sword. I'm just really fond of it and wanted to play with it for a bit. What did you think I was gonna do with it? Lan Wangji didn't know what to say. Wei Wuxian laughed, ha 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 ha, what are you thinking about, Lan Zan? Aren't you a bit too indecent? As he saw how Wei Wuxian not only denied it, but even instead returned the attack, Lan Wangji's expression was a spectacle. Having teased him for a while, Wei Wuxian was much satisfied as he continued, if you want me to not touch your sword, you can exchange it with yourself. How about that? Yes or no? Lan Wangji could neither say yes nor simply let him play with himself using Lan Wangji's own sword. He didn't know how to answer the question. Wei Wuxian kneeled on the ground with his back straight as he crawled towards him on his knees, coaxing, if you just say yes, I'll give you back your sword and do fun things with you. Yes or no? A while later, a word squeezed through Lan Wangji's clenched teeth, no. Wei Wuxian raised his brows, mark your word. He backed off from Lan Wangji's body and sat down before him, grinning as he parted his legs, then you can watch me play with Baiken. With such a shameless position of having his legs be spread so widely, Lan Wangji had a more than clear view of the sight at his private regions. Two fair buttocks parted slightly because of the wide motion, revealing the pink spot in between. With the fingering from before, the entrance was already somewhat swollen, yet with moisture, it seemed even more delicate. Wei Wuxian turned Baiken's blade around and pointed the hilt towards the entrance. He drew in a light breath. Pressing slightly, the thin folds were immediately smoothed, sucking on the tip of Baiken's hilt. A short length was instantly shoved in. Baiken's hilt felt almost as cold as ice or steel, sending a shiver down Wei Wuxian's spine. Suffering the cold, the tunnel squeezed even more, letting out a small portion of the hilt. At once, Wei Wuxian clenched Baiken and forced it inside his body with greater strength, starting to push and pull. The inner walls were sucking tight to begin with, and the hilt was covered with the bumps and dents of ancient carvings. The feeling of it rubbing inside was enough to drive one mad. As it kneaded at a particular spot, Wei Wuxian let out a low moan, drawing his legs slightly closer as he felt his head spin and his scalp tingle. He was once again aroused at the front, already erect. From Lan Wangji's perspective, it was truly a scene so impossibly obscene. Wei Wuxian lay in front of Lan Wangji, opening his legs out of his own will as he held Lan Wangji's sword Baiken down below. The hilt was hard and cold, making the soft entrance swollen in an almost pitiful way. Even so, Wei Wuxian still tried hard as he pushed and pulled it inside his body, his motions quickening as the thrusts became easier and easier. He breathed lightly as he gazed at Lan Wangji with glazed eyes, calling, "Lan Zhan. Lan Zhan." The calls were tinged with a slightly nasal tone. It seemed like he was begging him, or perhaps like unconscious murmurs that came from the pleasure. Either way, it was enough to muddle one's mind. Lan Wangji seemed as if he couldn't even shut his eyes again or even avert his gaze, staring with fervor at his face, at how he struggled under Baigan, at how he shuddered as he touched himself. Lan Wangji's knuckles cracked. On the other hand, Wei Wuxian had no idea what was happening here. With Baigan's dormant, he unconsciously drew his legs even nearer, all the way until he squeezed his thighs and buttocks together. The entrance also sucked even tighter on the sword hilt. Wei Wuxian let out a breath. Feeling both his arms and his legs drain of strength, he lay sideways on the ground. Just as he wanted to rest for a bit, his knees were suddenly seized by a pair of iron-like hands, and his legs were forced open. Wei Wuxian opened his eyes, only to crash into Lan Wangji's almost frighteningly red ones, ignited by a strange flame. He grabbed Baigan, pulled it out, and tossed it far away. The moment the hilt left his body, Wei Wuxian let out a moan, as if he was dissatisfied. Lan Wangji raged, shameless. He pressed Wei Wuxian onto the ground, shoving the purplish and swollen member inside. The moment he plunged in, he began to thrust with an unstoppable force. As soon as Lan Wangji entered, Wei Wuxian's legs obediently wrapped around Lan Wangji's waist as he hugged Lan Wangji's neck with compliance, in quite a welcoming way. Yet, after just a few thrusts, he felt that it was a bit too much. Lan Wangji's motions were too rough. Every time it seemed as if he was going to crash backwards from the force, his backside along with his tailbone hurting slightly. Wei Wuxian called, "Gentler. Urgege, go a bit gentler." Whether unfortunate or not, Wei Wuxian forgot that right now he was older than the Lan Wangji inside the dream. Having accidentally blurted out "Urgege," he not only didn't cause Lan Wangji to hold back at all, but instead Lan Wangji thrusted even harder, almost as if he wanted to break Wei Wuxian's buttocks as punishment. Wei Wuxian arched back his neck, drawing in a difficult breath amidst the storm-like rhythm. "It's so hot." Baigan's entire body effused cold air. Its shaft having been held within Wei Wuxian, it made his insides grow softer, yet somewhat cool to the touch. Meanwhile, Lan Wangji's manhood was both thicker and warmer than Baigan's shaft. And thus, every time Lan Wangji sank inside, it felt as if a ball of fire had burned through his stomach, so hot that Wei Wuxian wanted to roll all over the ground. Yet, after having touched himself for so long and along with Lan Wangji's rough motions, his body had long since gone limp, only able to shiver under Lan Wangji's attacks. Right now, in spite of his level of cultivation being much higher than Lan Wangji's, he was still unable to resist. When he really couldn't take it any longer, he could only dodge to the side, twisting his waist in desire to escape, yet Lan Wangji pinned him down. With a few deeper thrusts, he couldn't even make a sound anymore. Lan Wangji's harsh yet low voice sounded beside his ear, "Who is the husband?" At first, Wei Wuxian was still dazed and unable to react. Lan Wangji asked again, with a plunge so deep he almost perished from pleasure. He hurried, You're the husband." It was all karma for him. For a while, Wei Wuxian clenched his teeth and obediently endured the fucking. The cold inner walls were rubbed warm from the friction, and it finally felt a little better. The top of the shaft was roughly lined, driving into his body, while the tunnel itself was moist and soft, sucking and contracting sporadically. The curvature of the erection within him kneaded over that spot within him again and again. Wei Wuxian felt so good that he might go mad, yet he just had to pretend to be feeble and overwhelmed. As he shifted up and down from Lan Wangji's steady rhythm, he clung to Lan Wangji's arms and begged, "Urgege. Lan Zhan. Go a bit gentler, won't you? It hurts. I think I'm bleeding." It was indeed quite moist where the two were connected, and the wet squelches also grew louder in volume. Hearing this, Lan Wangji immediately looked down, and was at once frozen. Wei Wuxian whined, Is it bleeding? Lan Wangji let out a heavy breath. No? Wei Wuxian, no? Then what is it? Lan Wangji's deep voice sounded. You're wet. No matter for how long, the insides of Wei Wuxian's thighs had already become covered in some sort of fluid, while on Lan Wangji's dark erection was the same moist reflection. It could only be from within Wei Wuxian's body. Wei Wuxian pretended as if he didn't believe it. Really? Really? He asked as he grabbed Lan Wangji's hand and led him towards where they were joined. The rod was thick and lined with veins, stretching the small entrance to the maximum. Lan Wangji felt a handful of the viscous fluid, along with the two tightly connected bodies. As if he were stabbed by a needle, he immediately drew his hand away and looked. The fluid was transparent. It was, as expected, not blood. Wei Wuxian's and Lan Wangji's bodies were quite compatible with each other's. At the peak of arousal, of course the body would react on its own. Right now, however, Wei Wuxian was intent on teasing him. Seeing his curved lips, Lan Wangji knew that he'd been fooled, once again burying himself inside. Wei Wuxian's breath was shattered into pieces from the thrusts. He hurried, Lanzan, let me get up, let me be on top, alright? Lan Wangji seemed as though he didn't understand what Wei Wuxian meant by on top, hesitating slightly. Wei Wuxian hugged him and struggled hard to flip the two, switching their positions. At the moment, Lan Wangji lay flat on the ground while Wei Wuxian sat on top of him, the two of them connected hips to buttocks. In the process of the position switch, the thick, scorching erection remained deep within Wei Wuxian. It never left for a single moment, only subtly stirring around his insides. Wei Wuxian squinted from the pleasure, feeling his head begin to spin again. He looked down. Whether an illusion or not, he kept on feeling that his flat abdomen swelled slightly from Lan Wangji's member being inside. He couldn't help but reach down and touched his stomach. Soon, Lan Wangji lifted his buttocks and forced him to start moving. Wei Wuxian rose and fell from his hands. As he rose, he'd go so high up that only the stiff tip was inside his body. As he fell, he'd take the object below his hips all the way into the deepest parts of his body, so deep that he couldn't help but frown. On top of that, the pace was so fast it almost didn't allow any room to breathe. In the past, every time the two made love, such a position had to be involved, as it went the deepest and Wei Wuxian enjoyed it the most. Yet right now, he suffered rather greatly from the unbearable depth. The 17-year-old Lan Wangji of the dream had gone mad from the teasing, unable to control his force at all. And yet Wei Wuxian was fucked so hard that his legs shivered. He couldn't even stand, much less have the strength to struggle out. With such an unfortunate situation, he could only prop his hands on Lan Wangji's firm abdomen, gasping slightly. Wei Wuxian was born with a thin waist and thin hips, but there was quite a lot of flesh on his backside. Lan Wangji's fingers sank deep into the meat, squeezing and rubbing. Soon, there was a noticeable area of bruising. Wei Wuxian felt his entire body itch from the inside out, his buttocks aching from the rubbing. He couldn't help but push away one of Lan Wangji's hands. Yet, Lan Wangji seemed to be extremely dissatisfied by such a gesture. Frowning, his face darkened, and Wei Wuxian's butt cheek was afflicted with a loud, hard slap. The sound echoed crisply. Wei Wuxian was shocked speechless by the slap. In his whole life, not many people had hit him in such a place. Even when he misbehaved when he was young, Madame Yu had only whipped him on his back or his palms, much less Zhang Fengmian and Zhang Yanli who cared for him too much to hit him at all. When he watched children from other families be stripped of their trousers and beaten on the backside, he felt that it was shameful in every way, gloating that he'd never been beaten like that before. Yet right now, Lan Wangji had broken this streak of his, and not to mention, it was the 17-year-old Lan Wangji as well. Immediately, Wei Wuxian's face flashed between red and white. This was the first time the uncontrollable sense of shame arose within him in bed. The more he thought about it, the more he couldn't keep going. Even half his backside was still stinging. He quickly shouted, "I'm not doing it anymore," and rolled to the side, off of Lan Wangji's body. Dragging two limp legs, he struggled to crawl away, searching for his trousers. Lan Wangji was in the middle of arousal. Besides, he'd been squeezed and pinched and flicked and kissed and touched and threatened by Wei Wuxian for such a long time. He was filled to the brim by an unspeakable rage. Having suddenly discovered that Wei Wuxian was especially scared of others hitting him on the buttocks, how could he let go of him so easily? He waved his hand, and the trousers that Wei Wuxian had just pulled up to his knees immediately tore into pieces. Lan Wangji flipped his whole person over, locked his wrists behind his back, and landed another heavy hit on the snowy flesh. Alongside the crisp sound, Wei Wuxian's entire body trembled. He wailed, "It hurts." It didn't actually hurt. It was only just so unbearably embarrassing. In bed, Wei Wuxian never tried to suppress his sounds, and thus every time his voice would go somewhat hoarse in the middle. It didn't really sound like a cry of pain, but rather more like a tempting moan. Hearing this, Lan Wangji paused, his gaze lowering. Below his palms were the two round halves. Because of the two slaps, a light tint of pink shone through the fair skin, crisscrossed with rough fingerprints. Having been forcefully separated and fucked for so long, the crevice parted slightly, revealing the timidly contracting entrance, which seemed even softer now that it was swollen, almost making one doubt how it was able to swallow the hilt of Baiken and that horrifyingly sized member of Lan Wangji's. Near his buttocks and his inner thighs was lined with thin streaks of liquid. Lan Wangji's eyes darkened. On the other hand, having been seized by him, Wei Wuxian was scared he'd hit him again. He hurried to squeeze his entrance behind, trying hard to avert Lan Wangji's attention by making the slit open and close, hoping that he'd pay attention to the real deal and stop being so fixated on these two pieces of his flesh. As expected, he could hear Lan Wangji's breath grow heavier from behind. He flipped his body around and sunk in again. The entry was more than smooth. Feeling his body be filled up again, Wei Wuxian finally let out a breath of relief. However, before he could even let out his breath completely, Lan Wangji landed another slap at his backside. Wei Wuxian shivered from the strike, tightening uncontrollably. As the tip kneaded across his sensitive spot, he grew more erect as well, secreting drops of white. And then, every time Lan Wangji thrusted, he'd strike his butt cheeks, which meant every time Wei Wuxian's insides would tighten to the most when the front of Lan Wangji's erection dug into that vital spot as he grew harder at the front. It was 3 layers of stimulation layering on top of one another. He felt almost as if he was in the midst of a terrifying tempest, whimpering softly, "Don't be like this. Lanzan. Stop. Stop it. Wake up. Wake up, Lanzan." He knew Lan Wangji had always been aggressive in bed, and he'd always loved his aggression. Yet, this was the first time he was forced into such a corner. With dozens of slaps, Wei Wuxian's butt cheeks were both red and warm, slightly swollen. It felt stinging to the touch, and his body grew more sensitive as well. When Lan Wangji plunged into the depths again, he lowered his head and kissed Wei Wuxian's lips. Wei Wuxian weakly hugged his shoulder, melting into the kiss. Exhausted, he finally released. The milky fluid splattered between their abdomens. Following him, Lan Wangji also released to his content inside Wei Wuxian's body. After staying obediently for a while within the embrace, Wei Wuxian spoke, his voice hoarse, "It hurts." After having released the second time, it seemed as if Lan Wangji finally returned to his senses. Lying top of him, he somewhat helplessly asked, "Where?" Wei Wuxian. Of course he couldn't say his ass hurt. He only whispered, "Lanzan, kiss me some more, hurry up." Seeing how he looked down, behaving so oddly proper, pink crawled upon Lan Wangji's white earlobes. He did as he was told and hugged Wei Wuxian tightly, putting his lips around Wei Wuxian's as he initiated the tender kiss. When their lips parted, Lan Wangji indeed placed a light bite over Wei Wuxian's lower lip. And then both of them awakened. Lying atop the wooden bed of the Jingxi, the two looked across at each other for a few moments. Lan Wangji pulled Wei Wuxian into his arms again. In the embrace, Wei Wuxian was kissed for a long while. Satisfied, he shut his eyes. Lan Zhan. Let me ask you a question. By coming inside of me every time, is it that you want me to bear little young Master Lan for you? In the dream he teased Lan Wangji and ended up digging his own grave, so when he woke up and saw Lan Wangji again, he couldn't help but to spout out nonsense again. But Lan Wangji wasn't as easily flustered as before either. He only asked, "How could you?" Wei Wuxian shifted his sore arms, using them as a pillow for his head. "Ugh, if I could, with how much you fuck me all the time, there would have long since been a den of little ones running on the ground." Lan Wangji could never bear listening to such indecent words. "Stop it." Wei Wuxian propped up one leg, grinning. "Embarrassed again?" Before he even finished, he suddenly felt Lan Wangji lay a light pat on his buttocks. Wei Wuxian almost fell off the bed. "What are you doing?" "Lan Wangji, let me see." Wei Wuxian crawled up at once, ignoring her shaky legs. "No thanks, Lan Zhan, I certainly remember what wonderful things you did in your dream. Nobody had ever treated me like this. In the future you're not allowed to this either. Really, if you wanna fuck me then do it, I'll open my legs and let you do whatever you want, just don't hit me." Lan Wangji pulled him back onto the bed. "I will not." Having acquired his promise, Wei Wuxian was relieved. "Han Guangjun, mark your words." Lan Wangji, Amen. With 3 nights of toil, he felt the fatigue slowly rise. Wei Wuxian couldn't keep going either. He snuggled into Lan Wangji's arms again and mumbled, "Nobody had ever treated me like this." Lan Wangji stroked his hair and landed a kiss on his forehead. Shaking his head, he smiled. In Chapter